You're dealing with anxiety or you know somebody who deals with anxiety, we're going to just start by sharing a couple of stories. Some of these are clients, some of these are family members who went through this system of technologies. But which one would you like to start with? We've got many of them, but we were just talking before we went on here.
Why don't I share one of my favorites? Well, of course, I had a family member who went through this as a young woman. And when she went through this, she was 15 years old and she was having, like, her life was pretty normal up to that point. And all of a sudden, there was a big shift in her behavior. She started having panic attacks and anxiety, even to the point of cutting, which is really scary for any of you parents out there that are experiencing that with your children. I know that it's a very scary thing. And so she went through this process and the panic attacks went away. She still, to this day, many years later, will have anxiety on occasion, but we all have some anxiety or times when we feel more stressed, but it doesn't stay. And she doesn't go into full panic attack like she did back then. And also her depression really lifted. And what was kind of interesting about her story too, is that she started to notice that her schoolwork got easier, that she could retain things longer. She always felt that she had to work harder than most in order to get good grades. She would have to read the book, highlight the book, take notes fully to be prepared for tests. And she'd see other people not have to do all that. And after she went through the process, that was just an added benefit that her focus and attention improved as well. So that was a good story because that's someone I love very much in my life. And I got to see not only that change at that time, but even to today. She's just a very successful, hardworking young woman who has done so much with her life. And I'm not sure what it may have happened without this technology. So that's one of my favorites, right?
Something you'll hear us talk about a lot is we talk about the trajectory of somebody's life. And it's so common for people to come here. And of course, a lot of this is new for most people. They're like, what are these technologies? How do they work? And they're used to maybe some standard methods like medication. They're looking at maybe they've done counseling. They've tried a range of things. They come here, it becomes quite pivotal. They discover that their brain wants to self-correct. And when the brain self-corrects naturally, meaning that cortical balance is improved, it literally changes its chemistry. But when this happens naturally and the person feels the anxiety lift without all the effort, it kind of gives them a whole paradigm shift on how their brain functions. And they're very excited to get in the driver's seat of their brain once they understand what the brain wants. So just know it's fun to see a pivotal change. And then that trajectory, when you go out in time, eventually it levels out, but they see this amazing improvement. That improvement becomes a new norm. We always talk about neural pathways becoming dominant. So the brain, we know in large part, responds to these technologies by creating new neural pathways on a mass scale that it perceives apparently as more balanced. And this physical change eventually will dissipate the old imbalances that might be causing the anxiety. So anyway, hopefully reel me in a little bit if I get
No, I think
technical.
people want to hear that. They want to know. I mean, there's, I might explain it a little more basic. Just basically would give the brain a really nice mirror of itself from a perspective it hasn't seen before. And it goes about self-correcting because the brain always wants to improve itself. It just doesn't always have the information. I mean, it blows my mind that that's even possible. But when you think about like a mirror, if you look in a mirror and you see a smudge on your face, the mirror isn't going to fix the smudge, but that information gives you what you need to fix that smudge. And that's really what this technology is doing. But of course, it's way over my head with the brilliance of it and how it works and how can it even read your brain and then feed it back to you through the auditory. It's over my head, but for 15 years, I've seen one story after another of exciting results and life-changing.
Yeah. And this stuff, it's being led by computer scientists and mathematicians. Doctors are getting into it now because it's working. And so that always, suddenly opens their eyes. But I will say that some of the people we worked with one of the founders of one of these technologies, and interesting guy, but his world was computer science and developing algorithms for big companies. And it is interesting when you get into the mathematics. It's pretty intense and it's a little over my head too, but fortunately they've always been able to explain it in concept. And then of course, when we customize it, make adjustments, it's good to have a sense of how this thing's working. And of course, it's been helpful to have their guidance along the way. But so I will share a story that it is, you'll remember. It was a gentleman named Lucas came in. Yes. And it's funny because this is back in our Clarkston office. So this is quite a while ago. But he was in his teens. I think he might have been 17, maybe 16. But his mother had set up an appointment for him to come in and do a discovery consult. And it looked like he was not going to show. And so we were like, okay, it's about 5 minutes into his meeting. And we're thinking, well, Lucas isn't going to make it. And then we get a call from his mother. And his mom says, I'm sorry to say, but he is there. He's in the parking lot, but he's not able. He's having a panic attack and he's not able to come out. He's stuck in the car. So she said, would you consider going out there? And so I was like, okay. So I went out to the car. I get to the car and Lucas, who I'd never met before, the windows are all up. And I'm looking through the driver's side window. And I'm like, Lucas, are you okay? And he is white knuckling the steering wheel. And he can't even look at me. Of course, we had dealt with a lot of anxiety at that point. We knew what panic attacks were. So I kind of talked him down a little bit, managed to get him to lower the window. And then eventually we walked him in. So this is where Lucas was. He was in bad shape. Anxiety had taken over. He was having panic attacks regularly. He was already at the point where he's isolating himself. You can imagine what this did to his social life, but also school was really difficult because just to be present in a group would send him off on panic attacks. Nevertheless, we get him in. He does a series of sessions, and Lucas starts to notice a dramatic decrease in the general anxiety. Eventually, these panic attacks dissipated. They went away. Lucas was so thrilled. We actually have a video testimonial of Lucas, but he was really passionate about wanting to work with us. He ended up filling out a resume. He said, is there any chance I could work for you guys? I'd love to be able to get involved. He worked with us for how long do you think?
I don't know. 3 years?
I think 3 years.
I mean, he was a great employee. He did a great job.
He was fantastic. He was, in fact, if you're out there listening, Lucas,
we miss you.
We miss you, yes. Because basically once things started working out for Lucas, he ended up getting into college. I remember him coming back and introducing us to a girlfriend. I'm not sure where that went, but the fact that she seemed like a sweetheart, we were just excited because for him, we talked about that trajectory of life. And it was awesome to see this. We love getting in early because the earlier we can get in, the more we see that pivotal change. And rather than talking to somebody in their 50s or 60s where they're like, oh my gosh, I wish I could have done this years ago. If we can get in with
I didn't get to do
teenager-
it till I was 44. I mean, it would have been great to do it when I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe
I was in
life
my
would have been
40s.
easier.
Yes. So anyway, what's interesting is that regardless, these technologies are just fantastic for brain function. And when the brain's self-regulating, things like anxiety, depression, focus and concentration, these things tend to improve. They move in a positive direction. And so anxiety, I will just say, because, Brenton is about to join us.
Is he on now, Jordan?
He's ready when we are. So, I'll just say this. For people who are dealing with anxiety, a surprising experience when they go through these technologies is that they're not having to make any real effort. That once the brain self-regulates and these particular cortical imbalances start to adjust and self-regulate properly, people describe it as, I completely forgot to be anxious. This thing that usually sets me off happened, and I didn't even think about it until a couple hours later when I was kind of going, oh my gosh, I forgot to be anxious. Didn't bother me at all. So anyway, that being said, is Brenton ready?
Okay.
Brenton.
Hello. Took a little bit to get
I can't hear you.
in. I was a little anxious.
Oh, wait a minute, Brenton. We can't hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh,
There
there
you
you
are.
are.
Excellent. All right. It looks like we're good. So for people that might be new, most people probably know Brenton, but as I mentioned earlier, Brenton is a counselor. He's a Christian counselor, and he's also the owner and partner at Treeside, which is a counseling, would you call it a counseling clinic?
Yeah, it's a psychological clinic officially, but yes.
There we go. And how big is your team out there now? I know it changes a lot.
We have, I think we're at 17, including myself and my wife, who both run it.
Awesome.
So 15.
That's great.
Three are admin, and the rest are clinicians.
Is that what they're seeing, Jordan? His whole, or is it?
Oh, they can see.
Oh, they can see him in the middle. Okay, sorry, just trying to figure out.
Perfect.
Okay.
He's got it on his phone. Perfect. So
Okay.
real quick, I'm kind of curious, since we're obviously talking about anxiety, how common is it for you to see clients who are dealing with anxiety? How does that fit in compared to like depression, sleep issues, ADD, ADHD, that whole range of things? How often do you run into people that have anxiety?
So I don't have any stats on this, but I'll tell you that I work with a lot of men, and I find that anxiety seems to be, at least in my sample size that I have, more prominent or at least obvious in the women I work with. But I see it in both. I think guys, I think guys tend to go towards depression more. But so it's incredibly common. Everyone's dealing with it on some level. Like, it doesn't really matter who you are dealing with it. But whether or not it meets the criteria for the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistic Manual, that is, I don't know, on some level, everyone has some amount of anxiety, but whether or not it meets a diagnostic criteria is different.
What does it take to reach that criteria? How do you know? Like, it's healthy to have anxiety at times, right? Is what you're saying. It's normal. But then there's a level where it's not healthy, and I assume that's when it's on the DSM. Is that right?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different anxiety diagnoses. There's a ton of them. So there's generalized, and then there's phobias, and then there's a lot of different kinds. But I think what's in common in all of them is an uneasiness, a physiological response is very common too, where you just feel like your nervous system is working against you. So it's hard to settle in. There's the fight or flight feeling. And if the focal point is on what could go wrong in general, that's normally a good sign that someone is really dealing with it and struggling with it and needs to help working through it. What's interesting is therapy actually has an 85% success rate with anxiety diagnoses, which I just learned today. I thought that was pretty high.
That's really high.
Now, we run into people who it's gotten to the point of panic attacks on a regular basis. They're isolating and they're not functioning. They can't keep a job. And then, of course, we run into people who have low-grade anxiety. It's perpetual. It's starting to rise, and they're concerned about it. For you, like along that spectrum, from panic attacks down to just a low-grade anxiety, how does that fit in? Do you know how that might fit into the success rate?
I'm not certain. No, I don't have a study in front of me.
I'm kind of thrown in. I know.
It's sort of like I quoted a study. I'm quoting a study that from someone who showed me the study.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I know for
but I'm
us,
sure the more extreme I would imagine phobias probably are harder and don't have as high of a success rate. I'd imagine it's generalized anxiety that's 85%. That's sort of like that's the diagnosis for a person who just seems to be connected to anxiety in all areas of life, right? So like everything is worrying them,
right?
So they can attach it to anything. And anxiety is it's a sticky substance, if you will. It just finds a way. So it's amazing when I work with people and they'll tell me what they're anxious about. And I know over the years, I've realized like, it's not about the thing, right? It's almost rarely about the thing.
Right.
So they'll resolve that issue goes away, or the thing that they were concerned about is resolved. And then they're still anxious, but they'll attach it to something else almost immediately, right? So like people have focal points for their anxiety. I wish that people that were anxious would recognize that it's not about the stuff that's going on, unless you are in a situation where fight or flight is appropriate. When you are in do or die situations. And I think that if because of what it does. If you think it's outside of you, you don't look within. And there's just not much room for improvement there because you can't challenge yourself because the presumption is it's happening to you,
Right.
not
right.
your interpretation of it.
Right.
Right.
So I know you're very familiar with these technologies because you were with us for a while. You've also sent a lot of your clients here. What do you notice when you get to do both? Because it's kind of nice that you're able to counsel them, but you're also able to have them go through a system of technologies. When you put the two together, what do you notice? What are you experiencing?
I notice that they don't have to fight their own physiology as much.
Mhm.
There's this like real calming of the nervous system. So that fight or flight response, which is the more obvious one, but then there's also the freeze response. But this is a nervous system. We have two different nervous systems, right? And so one provides fight or flight, one provides freeze. What I find is that calms down, and now we can work through that fog that anxiety causes when it's physiologically affecting you. And
So let me just explain a little bit because, we use these terms so much, but basically we all have an autonomic nervous system that runs everything in our bodies. Everything that happens automatically is taken care of by the autonomic nervous system. So we know, and I know, Brenton, you experienced this, for 10 years we did brain mapping and graphing. And so what we would see is if a client had too much activity in the right side temporal lobe, they would be in fight or flight, or what's known as their sympathetic nervous system is activating. And that's where the heart starts beating faster. You feel like you're in a survival situation. Your body is acting as if it's in a survival situation. And that's appropriate if you are in a crisis situation, like Brenton said, and you need your system to go into that. But it ought to move out of that back into rest and digest and back and forth if it's healthy. The other side you talked about is the freeze mode, or the parasympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system. And trauma creates these imbalances. And the brain, in order to correct the imbalance, will take activity to the area where it needs to heal. So that's where you get that imbalance, like too much on the right side or too much on the left side. This is one example of many imbalances. But when we would see that person would be stuck in that fight or flight and they weren't shifting out. So this person, and I personally experienced fight or flight, they're trying to sleep at night and they're not sleeping. They're maybe having nightmares. They actually feel like they're fighting all night, even though they might be half asleep, because their system couldn't go into that rest and digest. Did I explain that well, Brenton, or would you add anything to that?
No, I think that sums it up.
Okay.
But, the interesting thing, if you also bring in faith, is we're told not to fear, not to worry, right? These are the things that Jesus brings into the conversation. But yet it is an essential part, or it is a big part of our makeup. And so I think that we have to be able to figure out a way to move towards doing it less and accepting that it is at the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The human condition.
Right. Yeah.
When you mention when you
Without
mention scripture, it's very interesting because the part where it says be anxious for nothing, but in everything through prayer and supplication, it talks about giving thanks, and it talks about prayer. And what's really fascinating from a neuroscientific standpoint, there are unwanted racing thoughts. And we know there's some specific cortical imbalances that relate to unwanted racing thoughts. And unwanted racing thoughts can lead you to, panic attacks or anxiety. They tend to be a little foreboding and fearful for people like that. But the big part of it is they're unwanted. They can't do anything about it, or they think they can't do anything about it. And yet, when we see people go through these technologies, and I'm guessing you may have done something like this with your counseling, there's something called a habit loop routine replacement. And it was developed by a neuroscientist. But what's interesting about it is it really correlates with that scripture. One of the things it talks about doing is when you notice there's sort of a proverbial flag placed upon the moment you begin your unwanted racing thoughts habit loop. And when people start to recognize this, they'll actually replace the routine portion. And in effect, what they're doing is they're just redirecting their mind. They're spotting the front end of the habit loop. The moment it occurs, they spot it. That outside observer suddenly switches tracks, and they'll go down a path. And one of the great things they can do is actually intentional, immersive giving thanks. Thanking. And now, of course, when you do this from a Christian perspective, you're talking to God, which is a powerful part of it. But it is fascinating to me how the neuroscience is sort of backing up some of the scripture. And we love it when these things come together.
Yeah, it's more or less discovering what God created, right?
That's how we come at it. But depending on your perspective, obviously we're coming from a Christian perspective. But
Right, yeah.
do you do anything
So-
like that when you're working with people to help treat them with unwanted racing thoughts or guide them?
Yeah. So the first step is really just knowing that it's happening, right? Some people enter into their anxiety mode and they don't know that it's happening. So they apply meaning to their anxiety, meaning like the anxiety will give us thoughts that we don't really want. And then you just believe them if you're not aware that you're in that state. So that's number one. But then we have to go through the process of figuring out how to separate automatic thoughts from our conscious thoughts, the ones that we want to create and we know we're creating them. And it's really important for people with anxiety to know that they're not responsible for their automatic thoughts. It's really painful if you believe that you are. I think I would commit, if I was responsible for every thought I had, I think I'd commit 6 felonies a day. So
Ooh, I didn't know that about you. No, I'm kidding.
I think a really helpful way to think about it is if you're in imagine being in a waiting room and you don't like what's on the TV or the radio. And it's saying things that are totally, you just don't want to hear. They're uncomfortable and they're a little personal. But you know that it's coming from that and it's not you producing it. And that's really how I think we need to think about it. And when we do, ironically, they settle down. The back of our brain is always sending signals to the front of the brain. And the back of the brain is where a lot of the automatic things happen. So that's where it's just instinctual aspect of the brain. So it sends messages to the front, and then the stronger your reaction is to any automatic thought it sends, it goes, oh, they want more. And it doesn't matter if you're the thing that you think to yourself is, I hate that thought. Or if it's like, I'm going to think about it for a while. It doesn't matter. The back of the brain goes, they want more of this. So they send more.
Right.
And so there is a relationship between how we talk to ourselves from the front to the back of the brain. A great way to deal with these automatic thoughts that come through is to try and have a neutral reaction to them. So it's interesting. So we just kind of have an interest in what comes through rather than holding on to it or reacting very negatively to it. And reacting very negatively to automatic thoughts is much more common.
Right. I think it's funny when a loved one says, just relax, just take it easy, just relax. Like they're trying to help out, but it seems like they're just putting a big flashlight on your situation.
Right.
So yeah, it's and that's when they feel the most off the rails.
That they should relax.
So I just want to mention real quick, I know we have you a little bit longer.
10 minutes.
About 10 minutes, but I'm just going to mention for people that might be new. One is tonight with this event, if you are interested in actually coming to our office, experiencing the technology personally, and having us sit down with you, answer any questions, but also dive a little deeper into what you might be struggling with, whether it's anxiety, of course, but also depression, focus and concentration issues. We're really good at helping people with sleep. People come here for energy, but regardless, you can do a discovery consultation just by calling tonight, and you can reserve it for 60% off. And so we just want you to know that we have our front desk is available right now. So if you call, just let them know you're familiar with the Anxiety and Technology live Facebook event, and they'll give you 60% off. But just know that's about a 90-minute meeting. It's well worth your time. We're going to show you our primary technology, but also a lot of our support technologies. You'll You're going to learn a lot. Our custom fit technology rooms have been developed over the last 15 years, and there's a lot of little details involved on why these are working so well. We love sharing this with people, but so don't hesitate to call. I guess we should, is the number, oh yes, the number is at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah. And I want you to know that when you do that tonight before 8 o'clock, we're also going to be giving away $2,000 in drawings. And you can see behind us here these beautiful gifts, and there's gift certificates in there. So it's a good time to schedule a discovery consult with us because you get it for $39, plus you get to be in our drawing for over $2,000 in prizes. So this is a good time to call. And we have a couple people at the front desk right now. So feel free to call 248-922-9490.
Yes.
And let's get back to Brenton.
Thank you, Brenton.
I think when Brenton leaves us, maybe we should talk a little more detail about what an assessment looks like so people can know more what to expect.
I want to mention too, and Brenton, this might be something, we've worked with a lot of veterans over the years. Today is Veterans Day. God bless our veterans.
Yeah, right.
We do have special rates for veterans. So if you know a veteran, you want to connect them with us, we always have special rates and make it a lot easier for veterans. We know a lot of them are really struggling, and we love helping our veterans.
Could we give away 2 no-charge assessments to 2 veterans if they call tonight?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if you have a loved one that's a vet, or if you're listening and you're a veteran, call and schedule tonight before 8, and we'll do a no-charge assessment. And we just love to meet you and thank you for your service and share more how we might be able to be of help.
Absolutely. So yeah, just let them know, and they'll give you a discovery consultation at no cost. Just let them know you're a veteran, or
we better say 2 because we can only do so many.
That's true. Yes, we will do 2 for sure.
I'd love to do everyone that calls, but.
So Brenton, you've dealt obviously a lot of these panic attacks or this anxiety. Sometimes maybe the person's felt anxious, or they've noticed that they carry anxiety since they were kids, but then something occurs, some kind of psychological trauma. Sometimes it's physical trauma, but certainly with our veterans, it's more often psychological trauma. What have you experienced as far as working with vets or people who suffered some substantial psychological trauma and are now the anxiety has gotten carried away?
So post-traumatic stress disorder is normally what comes from being in an active war. That is an appropriate amount of fight or flight or freeze response, right? It makes you great at what your task is, and you can complete it in that kind of scenario. The problem is that a lot of veterans come back and they can't get back to the mode that they were in prior to all of that, right? So when they hear a loud sound, they hit the ground and then realize, I didn't need to do that. And so it can be very difficult and isolating. A lot of veterans struggle with isolating because it's embarrassing for them to be in that experience. One of the things that's so important about anxiety is doing body work first. So when we talk about the fight or flight and we talk about freeze, breathing techniques, exercise, it's almost like it's hard to work through issues until we've worked on the body first. And anxiety communicates, like fight or flight and freeze, they communicate to the brain too. So there's an interaction that they're always having, but I find that working on the body reaction first is best. Is
that trying to change the physiology of the brain through working with the body?
I mean, they interact, right? It's interesting that we even separate the two, but yeah. So if the body is relaxed, like imagine like how your gut feels. If you don't feel well, your heart's beating fast, your brain is racing, like being able to figure out how to take control back where you focus on healing the body. Now, what you guys do, especially for veterans, is they don't have to talk about it. And that is so incredible for them to get them to a place where they might be able to talk about it. It's really difficult when I work with a veteran who came straight, who has sort of held this to themselves for a long time. And now that they're back in civilian life, they might even be ashamed of how they behave, even though it made sense at the time. So talking about it's so difficult. When I was at Brain Life, I would hear from several veterans that they had had the experience that they had their nervous system calmed, and suddenly we can talk now. But to talk about it before was almost impossible because it would activate that nervous system.
Yes.
Yeah, I know sometimes when I meet with clients, I feel like first we got to put out the fire, then we can, engage forward. But sometimes even discussing solutions is just adding to the problem when you're on fire like that, when your system's in fight or flight and you're like, it's hard to even process that
Right.
kind of information.
It's amazing how often wives bring in their husbands and the husband he's not functioning well. And it is interesting how men, and I guess it might be a pride issue, but men will be embarrassed about it, not want to talk about it. Often they don't even think anxiety. They'll just think high stress. And
Yeah, guys like the word stress. That's their favorite.
Yeah, that's right. They don't want to show weakness. And so that sometimes gets in the way, but it's fascinating. They'll come in. Sometimes you can tell they're not really hearing a lot of what you're saying, but their wife is giving them a little help so that they're going to get in the chair and place these sensors, do the different placements. And in a very short amount of time, without them putting any effort, they just have to show up and get in the chair. It is awesome when we start seeing it starts to lift and their body language changes, all the tension that you see when you're engaging with them. It is like getting to know them for the first time. You meet him the first time, you don't really know the guy.
Yeah.
A week later, you're talking to him and it's like, oh, wow, this is the guy he was meant to be.
They're getting to know themselves too.
Oh, it's amazing.
Right.
And they're getting to know their brain. It's like it gives them a lot of confidence when they start having those early breakthroughs. And now they're like, okay, I'm on a path here. What do I do to maintain this path and, continue this positive trend? And it's nice when they're engaged as opposed to they're just shutting down.
Right.
So
if you work with people with anxiety, here's just a little helpful tip for anybody who's listening. Anxiety and excitement are very closely related.
I'm sorry, say that again, Brendan.
We're working composition here.
Anxiety and excitement are very closely related. And if you're working with anybody who is on that fence of like, it's a sort of just a general buzzing anxiety that they have, they've found that if you call it to yourself in your own mind or out loud, you call it excitement, it drastically improves the experience. There's just a little tidbit that I think is very interesting, and I've been using it for years. And so
it is. It's like it's a different perception on similar experiences.
Yeah.
So I really want to respect your time, Brent. You've been very generous with us, but I know you have a family that is waiting for you, and we really want to honor your time. So that was a great way to send you off with that awesome tip. And again, thank you so much for your time. And
that went fast, Brenton.
It did.
It's much appreciated.
It fast, didn't it?
Yeah, really appreciate you doing this with us. I think it's a benefit to many.
If I get the chance to do it again, we could always expound on it.
Well, we will.
Yeah, there's plenty more. Well, thank you, Brenton, and we'll see you soon. Have a good night.
God bless.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Good night.
All right.
I love his insights every time we talk to him. I really appreciate it.
I'm not kidding. Knowing him for all these years, seeing how he's developed as a counselor, and now obviously the owner of that facility, Treeside, he's amazing. I send people to him and they love the guy because they see results fast. And the only downside is he's often booked up. But,
very gifted.
What do you do? Yeah.
But he's also put together a team of people that he can trust and knows that they'll take care of anyone who comes through their doors. So I trust his team.
Do we have, Jordan? Oh, good. Okay. So we're okay. So we'll start wrapping things up here, but if anybody has questions, feel free to throw some questions at us.
Hi, Justin. We miss you.
Yes, Justin.
And I saw that Mel's listening, and Ginger too. Ginger, hello. It's nice for you to join us.
So, perfect. Okay. So a couple of things I just want to say is the technology itself, it's an amazing, the impact it's having on anxiety of different types is remarkable. all you do really from your perspective as a client is you just get in a chair. A session is about an hour. And the first part of the session, we have a support technology. It has 5 placements. Included there is a little intranasal. It is incredibly safe, but the studies are just amazing on this technology. And we've worked it into our system based on talking to reps and engineers. And what's amazing about this technology is it's improving the brain's ability to receive oxygen on a cellular level. So it's improving oxygen uptake. The blood flow is improving. It's powering up what they call the mitochondria. And a lot of people are hearing about this, but basically, if you can power up the mitochondria of a brain cell, it connects with another brain cell a little more effectively. You can improve neuroplasticity. And this has a tremendous impact on how the brain can respond to our primary technology, which is, as you probably know, or most people know, it's the EEG auditory. It's an audiovisual, but it's predominantly auditory, and it's a mirror. So it's EEG auditory mirror neurofeedback. And we do that the second part of the hour. And what's interesting too is Brenton touched on some things that are very helpful. There's these specific techniques which gets the body engaged, and the way you actually perceive the way your brain's functioning around anxiety. Well, we've introduced these during one of our technologies as basically they're neuroassociative exercises with sounds that your brain gets familiar with. And then we give these to you to take home on a smartphone, a tablet, your computer. And we're finding greater success, longer term success with people now that they're able to take this home. And their brain's so familiar with it because we're playing these very unique sounds and visuals during our protocols. So anyway, I hope that's not too much, but we said we talk a little bit about the technologies. The key for you is, as a client, you just get in a chair for about an hour. You've probably seen our zero gravity chairs. They've been custom fit. They're very comfortable. We give you a pillow and a blanket. Our technologists, they just do the recommended protocols. So they're moving some things around, but it's completely safe. Like I said, there's certain placements from one technology to another. But a lot of people, including my wife, years ago when she did this, they fall asleep during the protocols. And that's perfectly fine, but they're so comfortable they fall asleep. And within a very short set of protocols and a short set, a number of sessions, people start getting results. And that's, as Brenton said, it's beautiful because for that vet who's struggling and not really, he's done all the counseling, he's tried all these different things. When he starts to see results, it's noticeable, it's effortless. He just had to show up for a few sessions, a number of sessions, right?
Right.
So,
right. And that's, when you just have to show up, that makes it a little easier and a little, I mean, I've had people come in and they don't want to share all that, whether they're vets or not. Sometimes people don't want, some people like to share, and we like to share, hear their stories because it helps us really relate to where they are. But the technology it can help someone if they don't tell us anything about themselves. And I think that's, for some people, a relief, I do want to, we have Katina, hello, a question. Can you help someone get off anxiety medications? And the answer to that is no, because we're not in the medical field, but we've helped people through their doctor come off anxiety medications. A lot of our clients have come off anxiety meds because when the brain comes into balance, they may not need the medication anymore, or they may need less of that medication. So if they have a good doctor that works with them on their own goals, and which many doctors are helpful, helping their patients come off medications. But we always tell people, listen to your doctor, because people will try to drop medications too quickly. And that brings about a whole nother series of problems. So you definitely want whoever puts you on the medication or overseeing your medical care should give you a plan for coming off the medications. But this technology, if you think about it, medication either inhibits or stimulates in the brain. And so as you remove that from the brain, if you can give the brain a mirror so it can see itself with this new information or less information from the medication, it can adapt easier because it just has more information to do so. So absolutely, we can see people come off meds, but we personally aren't the ones that are.
Yeah.
We're not the doctor.
We always want to be really careful.
How do I want to say that?
So here's a really common timeline that we experience. And this is hundreds, if not thousands of times. Somebody comes in, they're dealing with severe anxiety, and they're on a lot of medication. Sometimes one, something substantial, a psychotropic med for anxiety, sometimes 2 or 3. Some of them have been on it for quite a while, and they're going through this process where the medication they started on so many years ago, they're getting diminished returns over time, and so they're increasing dose. So they're going to their doctor, increasing dose. Sometimes they get to a point where the doctor says, okay, we can't increase dose anymore. We're going to have to try to get you on something else because this one's not going to be working like it used to. Well, we often will talk to these people. They come here, and so it's like, okay, stick with the status quo. Whatever your doctor is recommending, stay with that. Now we're going to add these technologies to your program. When you start experiencing improvements, now you're going to have a lot of confidence. And what they do is they end up going and talking to their doctor, a doctor they can trust, about what would it look like if I were to reduce dose, or maybe even possibly wean off, but doing it appropriately at the doctor's guidance or with the doctor's guidance. They will then come to us and they'll say, okay, this is our plan. So let's say we do a set of sessions, they're feeling better, and they're like, yeah, I'm ready to get off these meds. They go and talk to their doctor. Sometimes we'll see them 6 months later, and they're like, okay, I'm ready to wean off. My doctor gave me this program. When possible, we love to talk to the doctor so that we're doing protocols to help the person wean off the medications. But we're coming at it from our perspective, these different technologies and how we can help make it a little easier, because obviously often weaning off meds, not so easy. So does that, hopefully that kind of explains.
I think I said the same thing. No, I'm kidding.
Yes.
I can tease him. He's my brother.
I wanted to say it not as well.
I'm just kidding.
So did I do that? Was that a repeat?
No, that was really good. I think it was really helpful. We've got Deanna wants to know if we can help children. And you know who I think of when I hear that? Who is that beautiful young woman who had anxiety from birth? She shares her testimony online. She wrote a story, or she wrote a letter about her story.
Gosh.
I can't remember her name.
I don't know her name.
But
Yes.
she basically from birth cried a lot. Her mom and dad didn't know what was going on with her. She ended up, she couldn't handle preschool or going to school. She would cry and cry. And she says in her testimony that maybe we could highlight this somehow tomorrow so people can see it.
Yeah,
That she noticed that other people around her, the other kids weren't crying while she was just desperately needing her mom not to leave. Like that separation anxiety was really intense. And we didn't meet her till she was 11 years old, and she couldn't go to school. She couldn't go shopping with her mom. I mean, I think she tried to go to school, but she missed a lot of days because of anxiety.
They'd pull up and she couldn't get out of the car, so they'd drive home.
And 11 years old, it's so young. She was such a beautiful young woman, but she went through this and that changed. And her mom in tears says in the testimony that they got to go shopping together. And the dad noticed her spelling improved. I know he was very excited about that. But she was back at school and she was enjoying the experience. And she had no idea what we were doing here, but her brain, for whatever, maybe even during the birthing process, we can have trauma imprints that come very early and we don't understand them.
Right.
But gave her little brain a mirror. It corrected itself. I'd love to know how she's doing today. I don't know. She's got to be 18, maybe 18, 17. I mean, it's a while ago. I'd love to hear her story now. I bet her life. She wrote this letter and she really wanted to reach out to others who struggled with anxiety. And she said she felt God put her in that situation. She always wondered why. And she knew it was because he wanted her to help other people. And God wanted her to understand what it was like to have that kind of anxiety. I mean, what a mature response.
It was awesome. And it was funny. Yes, her mom gets quite teared up
Oh,
when she does the video testimonial. So
her
we'll
name.
have to maybe flag that. And I haven't thought about her in a long time, but man, it is nice. We don't always know what the cause is. It could be a genetic thing. It could be something that happened in utero, but we've worked with people who were adopted, and there's no recollection of maybe the trauma they experienced, but clearly something's wrong. And they could be very young and they have no idea what we're doing, but we put the placements where they need to be. They sit in that chair, they go through the process, and they start seeing improvement. And we're still, it's been about 15 years and we're still amazed at what happens. It's like the brain, if you think about this, computer scientists and mathematicians gave us for the first time an ability for the brain to actually experience its own activity live in a perspective it's never had before. And the brain is adapting so rapidly. and it's moving on it. And we know about the cortical imbalances, but we know a lot more is happening that we have not discovered yet. But a passive auditory reflection of the brain's activity, and the brain is all over it, and the self-regulating is incredible. So, all right, I think we need to wrap it up.
Yeah, let's just remind people that we have almost a little over 10 minutes to call to get the 60% off. So a $39 discovery consult.
Yes.
And you get to be in the drawing for these gifts that include over $2,000 in prizes, because some of it is gift certificates toward our services. And we'd love you to take advantage of that. So we have till 8:00 tonight, right?
Yes.
Is that
Call
right?
tonight.
Okay.
And just this discovery consultation, like we said, it's 90 minutes. You'll get to experience the technology room and all the custom fit technologies, the support technologies. You'll start to have a better sense of the system of technologies that's been developing all these years. But we'll also start talking about your specific issues or a family member of yours. So we get to dive deep into what it is you're struggling with. And then we get to set out a plan that's very specific for you. And you'll have a really full understanding of that by the end of that meeting. We make sure all your questions are answered, because once we really start getting to know you, it takes us down a path that's very unique to you. And then we get to, present these protocols that are going to be ideal for you. And once you start to see that, it'll make a lot more sense. And by the end of the meeting, you'll have clarity. You'll really understand what we're talking about here. We know it's hard to cover so much with these live events in a short or even a phone call, right? But that's why we set these things up, so you can come in and fully understand what we're doing here and how it can help you specifically.
And I think it's something that I think is amazing is that we meet with people at the Discovery Consult, and then we meet with them again in about somewhere between 8 and 10 weeks, and their life has changed dramatically. So this isn't like a year program. This doesn't go on forever and ever. 6 to 8 weeks, people are noticing huge transformation. That's amazing. It's amazing. There's not many things like, that'll give you that kind of result with no side effects.
Right. So that's with people who are close, right? They can drive here and they can space these things out. In some cases, it's one a week, right? Sure. We have people come from out of state, and they'll do the entire program in 9 days. And so there's a whole program around that, because when people come from out of state, of course, they have limited time. So we're trying to attack the problem as quickly as possible and get results as fast as we can. So just know there's a range here. And again, when you come in, that's part of kind of assessing your situation. What's the best program for you, and how can we customize all of these programs for you? So anything else that we might be missing?
I hope not. I think we got everything. Jordan, if not, we'll catch it next time. Here?
Okay. Well, we always feel like we have a lot more, but please give us a call.
Wait, we have a question.
Yeah.
Oh, PTSD. How much... Is it Arlene? Arlene, how much success do you see with people suffering from military PTSD? We worked with a lot of vets. There was some funding that paid for our services. I wonder how many vets we worked with at that time. Yeah. And because it was covered, we worked with many vets back to back. Actually, Brenton was involved a great deal with that. And I don't know the numbers. I bet it was 90%, 85%.
We had a veteran go through this, and it just turned his life around. And he was not able to hold a job. He had a wife and kids. It was such a turnaround. The wife was like, oh my gosh, we need to get other veterans in there. And so she started a foundation.
Yes.
And she raised money, a lot of money, to help vets. And so we did that for quite a while. Now, she didn't realize how quickly we might go through that. You remember, she was like, okay, we raised all this money, and so many vets came in. It was awesome. We love working with these guys, but also just know that for veterans with post-traumatic stress, there's some, we've worked with Vietnam vets, so that's 40 some years ago. And they've been in and out of the VA hospital on medications. And still, all these years later, in their 60s, they see major turnarounds. I can't tell you how awesome that was, because sometimes people think, oh no, I'm broken, I can't be fixed. But even all those years later, of course, people from, Desert Storm. Can't tell you how many people came in from Desert Storm. So it was many years later, and they were describing, right, they're feeling the same tension they were feeling in combat, but it's many, many years later, and they're feeling that in their living room. And for that to lift, so they can get back to their families. It's absolutely awesome. So yeah,
Something we learned during that time too is a lot of vets, they don't want to be diagnosed with PTSD because it affects
oh yeah, there's a
jobs
little
or
stigma.
and we're not medical here, so we don't have to work with a diagnosis. We can just work with whatever symptoms,
Yep.
and we don't. It's not even in. It doesn't go into public record or anything. It's just our own
It's
private
completely
office,
private.
and so the diagnosis isn't even necessary. If there's anxiety, if there is depression, isolation, any of those things, we don't have to talk. Even if we do talk about it, it's private here. There's no public records with our office. So I think that's important for many vets.
Yes. Well, I'm glad. That's a good way to wrap this up on Veterans Day.
Yes.
God bless our veterans. Thank you
Mhm.
for your service. We hope you'll give us a call, reach out, go to the website. You can learn a little bit more about us, but please move towards the discovery consultation. If you're a vet, we want to meet with you. It is private. Nobody has to know. And we just want to make some recommendations, get you into the technologies and get you some results. So God bless you. Thank you all for joining us. And we look forward to.
Do we know what we're doing next month?
We haven't decided, but we're going to be doing another. It might be an extension. We might do some more on anxiety, depending on what people ask for. But as we move into the holidays, we've got some thoughts. We will be disclosing what we'll be talking about at our next event.
So it's the second
in the
Monday,
coming week.
Second Monday in December at 7:00, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's when our next one will be. We hope you join us and bring some friends along.
Possibly seasonal.
Seasonal.
Yes, that's right. Seasonal depression. People going into the winter months. Oh, we've got so much to share about that. Yeah, it's fascinating. Especially one of our support technologies is so good for that. So yes, we'll probably do seasonal affective disorder and depression as we move into the winter and we move into the shortest days of the year and very little sun. So,
Yeah.
all right. Have a good night. God bless you. And thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.